Netanyahu just did this on camera. Is this biblical prophecy? What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about current events and ancient prophecy. On July 7th, 2025, something extraordinary happened behind closed doors at the White House. Something that has biblical scholars, political analysts, and prophecy watchers around the world sitting up and taking notice. Picture this: the White House. Two of the most powerful leaders in the world having what sources described as an urgent and sensitive conversation. Present were Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Netanyahu's wife Sarah. But here's where it gets interesting. During this private meeting, Netanyahu did something unprecedented. He presented Trump with a formal letter, but not just any letter. This was a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. Netanyahu praised Trump's leadership in what he called stabilizing the Middle East. The meeting wasn't just about celebrating past victories. Trump and Netanyahu spent significant time discussing something that could reshape the entire Middle East, and it directly connects to biblical prophecy about the end times. They talked extensively about expanding the Abraham Accords. Most people think the Abraham Accords are just peace treaties. They're wrong. These agreements represent something far more significant from a biblical perspective, and what Trump and Netanyahu discussed reveals the true prophetic nature of these accords. The Abraham Accords brought together nations that were historical enemies. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan all normalized relations with Israel. What if the biggest peace deal in the Middle East isn't really about peace at all? What if it's the first step toward deception, war, and the rise of the Antichrist? The Abraham Accords were celebrated around the world, but some Bible prophecy experts are warning this might be Daniel's treacherous treaty, a covenant that looks like hope, but leads to the end. Let's go to the book of Daniel. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Daniel 9:27. 1 week in prophecy equals 7 years. This verse speaks of a future world leader, someone powerful. He confirms a treaty with many, and the world enters its darkest hour. Could the Abraham Accords be the foundation for this future covenant? If so, what happens when more nations join? Donald Trump said, "We have some really great countries in there right now. I think we're going to start loading them up." He called it his dream for Saudi Arabia to join. He tied the peace process to Gaza, to Iran, and to Israel's future security. At a 2025 rally, he claimed, "With the Abraham Accords, I even made peace in the Middle East." But here's what we need to understand. Peace with many nations is exactly what Daniel described. When a deal includes many, prophecy gets louder. Mind-blowing fun fact. The Abraham Accords are named after Abraham, the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The name itself appeals to 3 world religions, just like the future world ruler will. If this is the treaty Daniel warned about, then we're closer to the tribulation than anyone realizes. Now, this does not mean that the Abraham Accords is the treacherous treaty. It could only be a foundation. Let's stop for a moment and ask the question that changes everything. What is the one thing that absolutely must happen before Daniel's prophecy is fulfilled? It's not just a signature. It's not just a photo op between world leaders. It's a temple, not just any temple, the 3rd temple in Jerusalem. And here's where things get intense, because once this temple is built, once it's standing and functioning, you can be certain we are deep into the end times timeline. And in the middle of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Daniel 9:27. Now stop and think. How can sacrifices stop if they haven't even started again yet? That's right. There has to be a working temple before the treaty gets broken. So why isn't anyone talking about this? Why is the Temple Mount always in the headlines, but no one's telling you what's being planned behind the scenes? Because something massive is brewing, and it's way bigger than politics. And here's what almost no one realizes. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem isn't just drawing up blueprints. They've already built everything. The menorah, the altars, the priestly garments, the musical instruments. They even have qualified Levite priests trained and ready to go. All they need now is the green light. First the peace deal, then the permissions, then the temple rises. And when it does, prophecy doesn't just begin, it accelerates. Now listen closely. There's one tiny critical problem. The Dome of the Rock sits directly on the Temple Mount. That's Islam's third holiest site. If Israel even tries to build the temple there right now, the entire Middle East could explode. So how could it ever happen? How do you get Muslims, Jews, and global powers to agree on sharing one of the most controversial pieces of land in the world? It'll take more than politics to make that happen. It'll take a man who can do what no one else can. Someone who can confirm the covenant. Someone who will appear to have supernatural answers. And that, my friend, is where the Antichrist steps in. But let's stay focused here. Let's go even deeper, because you may be wondering, are there any signs the temple is already being prepared for right now? Yes, let's talk about one of the biggest ones, one that many Christians completely miss, the red heifer. In Numbers 19, God commanded that a red heifer be sacrificed in a specific way to purify the temple. It's an ancient, rare ritual, and without this animal, the temple cannot be ritually cleansed. Well, guess what? For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, a perfect red heifer exists. In Israel. Right now. Actually, there are several, and they're being carefully watched, protected, until they reach the age of sacrifice. That's not speculation, that's reality. The Temple Institute brought these red heifers over from Texas, and they've even stated publicly that if the moment comes, they're ready to proceed immediately. Let that sink in. If the red heifer is ready, if the furnishings are complete, if the priests are trained, and if a deal like the Abraham Accords is already connecting Israel with her former enemies, then the only piece left is the moment, the green light, and someone powerful enough to bring all the sides together. So here's the real question. What happens when that man steps forward and confirms the covenant? That moment doesn't just mark progress, it marks the beginning of the final countdown, the final 7 years, the final chance to choose sides, because once that temple rises, it's no longer theory, it's happening. If you understand this timeline, you won't be fooled. But if you ignore it, you might not realize the end has already begun. Year 0. The treaty is signed. It all starts here. The world is in chaos. Tensions are high. Peace seems impossible. Then one man steps forward, calm, confident, brilliant. He brings nations to the table, and he confirms a covenant. Not just a new deal, but possibly one already started, like the Abraham Accords. This is Daniel's week 1. He shall confirm the covenant with many, Daniel 9:27. This is the start of the 7-year countdown. Many believe it will include a false peace between Israel and her enemies, permission to rebuild the Jewish temple, a shared religious arrangement on the Temple Mount. The Hebrew word for confirm is gabar, meaning to strengthen, enforce, or make strong. That could mean a leader takes an existing agreement and makes it official and global. Year 1 to 3, the calm before the storm. At first it seems to work. Peace spreads, Israel prospers, the world exhales. People will say, peace and safety. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. But it's a trap. Behind the scenes, the Antichrist is gaining power, economically, politically, even religiously. A one-world system begins to form. The temple in Jerusalem is completed. Sacrifices begin again. The Jewish world thinks their Messiah is near, but they have no idea what's coming next. When the world is most relaxed, the sword will strike. What happens at the exact halfway mark? What event splits the 7 years into 2 very different halves? Midpoint, 3.5 years, the great betrayal. This is the moment everything changes. Right at the 3.5-year mark, 1,260 days in, the Antichrist walks into the newly built temple. He doesn't bring peace, he brings blasphemy. He shall cause the sacrifice to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. Daniel 9:27. This is what Jesus called the abomination of desolation. Matthew 24:15. He stops the offerings, he sets up an image, and he declares himself to be God. People who trusted him are now trapped. Jews realize the deception. Believers flee. The great tribulation begins. Jesus gave a specific warning for this day. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Matthew 24:16. Year 4 to 6. The reign of terror. Let's pause for a second and take a breath, because from here forward, the timeline gets dark. We are now entering the second half of Daniel's 7-year treaty, the final 3.5 years. This is no longer just a treaty. This becomes tyranny. And if you thought the first half was bad, you haven't seen anything yet, because from the exact moment the Antichrist walks into the rebuilt temple and declares himself to be God, everything changes. This is what Jesus called great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world. Matthew 24:21. What does a world ruled by the Antichrist actually look like? What happens when worship becomes mandatory? What if survival itself requires betrayal? Let's walk through it. Global worship system is enforced. Now the Antichrist is no longer hiding behind diplomacy. He doesn't need to. The mask is off. He's demanding worship, and anyone who refuses to worship the beast or his image is killed. And as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Revelation 13:15. You won't just need courage in this time, you'll need conviction that costs everything. This isn't about religion anymore. This is about total control. The mark of the beast is introduced. Here's where things escalate beyond belief. The Bible says, "He causeth all to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." Revelation 13. And without this mark, you cannot buy groceries, pay rent, receive healthcare, travel, work, or function in society. What exactly is the mark? A chip? A tattoo? A digital ID? We'll get to that. But first, understand this. The mark isn't just technology, it's worship. Taking it means you're pledging your loyalty to the beast. Refuse the mark, and the world turns on you. Take the mark, and heaven turns from you. If any man worship the beast, he shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. The treaty led to peace. The peace gave way to power. The power becomes possession. Martyrdom begins to spread. This is where hearts start pounding, because for those who refuse to bow, the path forward is brutal. They're hunted, imprisoned, executed. I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus. Revelation 20, verse 4. Yes, beheaded. This isn't just symbolic. Holding your child, praying your voice doesn't echo. All because you won't say yes to a system that hates your king. And yet, those who die, they are honored, they are raised, and they reign. They lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Revelation 24. The world may erase your name from its system, but God writes it in His book. God's judgments begin to fall. Now we reach the tipping point. Heaven begins to answer earth's rebellion. This is when God releases His judgments, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls, each wave more intense than the last. During one trumpet judgment, a single event kills 1/3 of mankind. That's over 2 billion people at today's numbers. Revelation 9:15. This is no longer just spiritual war. This is global devastation. Men will seek death and shall not find it. Revelation 9:6. That means pain so great people want to die, but can't. Why does God allow this? Is it punishment, or is it still mercy? Stick with me, because the answer may surprise you. The two witnesses rise. Even in judgment, God sends hope. Two mysterious men rise in Jerusalem. They preach for 1,260 days, the exact length of the second half of the treaty. They have power to call down fire, stop rain, turn water to blood, strike the earth with plagues. If any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth. Revelation 11:5. The world watches them on live stream. People hate them, but heaven protects them until their mission is complete. Then the beast kills them. Their bodies lie in the streets for 3.5 days, and the world celebrates. But then, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet. Revelation 11:11. They rise, they ascend, and a great earthquake strikes. Judgment again. Every time evil seems to win, God is just waiting to make his move. The system begins to collapse. Here's what nobody expects. Even with all this power, the Antichrist system begins to crack. God's plagues break the earth. His throne darkens, the Euphrates River dries up, and the armies of the world begin to march toward one place, Armageddon. And he gathered them together into a place called Armageddon. Revelation 16:16. What began as a treaty became a throne and ends in a battlefield. Final year. The king returns. All right, lean in, because this is where everything changes. The final year of Daniel's 7-year timeline isn't just dramatic. It's unstoppable. The world is exhausted. The Antichrist has reached full power. The persecution is at its peak. The cities are in chaos. The mark of the beast is now required for everything. There's no buying. There's no selling. There's no hiding. Only choosing. But what happens to those who refuse the mark? What happens to the saints who endure to the end? This is the moment they've been waiting for. And the enemy? He knows his time is up. Let's rewind for 1 second. Because the Bible said this all started with a covenant. Remember? A 7-year agreement. But at the end of that 7th year, on the last leg of the Antichrist's reign, the sky splits open, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Matthew 24:30. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him. Revelation 1:7. This is not a secret event. This is a global shockwave. The man who tried to rule the world is about to bow to the one who made it. Let me paint the picture for you. The armies of the Antichrist have gathered. They're surrounding Jerusalem. They're ready for war. They're marching into the valley of Megiddo, what we call Armageddon. And just when it seems like evil has finally won, he appears, Jesus Christ. Not meek and lowly, not the lamb this time, but the lion, wearing a robe dipped in blood, with fire in his eyes, a crown on his head, and a sword coming out of his mouth. And the armies which were in heaven followed him, Revelation 19:14. Guess who's in that army? You. The Savior returns. The army follows, the battle begins. The kingdom is claimed. But here's where it gets intense. This isn't a long war. This isn't a Netflix drama with multiple battles and seasons. Jesus speaks a single word, and the beast falls. The Antichrist is captured, the false prophet is seized, and they are both thrown alive into the lake of fire. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. Revelation 19:20. Let's stop here for a second, because this is a statement. This is not symbolic. This is literal. Jesus doesn't negotiate with evil. He destroys it. But what about Satan? What happens to the dragon behind the scenes? He doesn't escape either. And he laid hold on the dragon, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Revelation 20 verse 2. Can you feel that? This is the moment when the tyrant loses, the moment when the treaty collapses for good. The same treaty that started with a promise of peace ends with total power being given back to the rightful king. The world has never seen justice like this. The poor who were hunted, the faithful who were mocked, the martyrs who were silenced, all now stand vindicated because the king has come. This whole thing began with a signature, but it ends with a sword and a crown. Let's zoom out, because this isn't just the end of evil. It's the beginning of something beautiful. Jesus sets up his kingdom on earth. He reigns from Jerusalem. The earth is restored. The lion lies with the lamb. Children play safely in the streets. The nations come to worship the king year after year. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. Zechariah 14:9. 7 years. 1 treaty, 2 witnesses, 3.5 years of peace, 3.5 years of terror, then glory. And you may be wondering, where will I be? If you belong to Jesus, you'll be there. You'll be with him. You'll rule and reign alongside him. You won't be watching from the sidelines. You'll be riding beside the King of Glory. If you miss this timeline, you may miss the return. If you ignore the signs, you may fall for the lie. And by the way, something else happens the moment he returns. Something involving the Mount of Olives splitting in two. But that's a story for the next video. Don't miss it. The treaty began with a lie. The midpoint was a betrayal. But the end is a king riding on clouds, and that king is coming back for you. You may be asking, what do I do with all this? Here's the answer. Wake up. Understand the times. Know the word. Be spiritually ready. Because if you see a world leader rise, if you hear of a 7-year peace deal with Israel, if you watch the temple being rebuilt, then you'll know. It's not politics, it's prophecy. We are not waiting for it to begin. We may already be standing at the edge. Ignore this and you may walk straight into deception. Understand this, and you'll walk boldly into God's plan. Don't just be informed, be transformed. The Antichrist has a plan, but so does God. And God's plan wins. Jesus is coming back. But before he does, he said, "Watch ye therefore, and pray always." Luke 21:36. The complete timeline of Daniel's treacherous treaty has been revealed. Now the question is, will you be watching when it begins? Or will you wake up when it's already too late?